Chapter 1. Annulment before marriage. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Misty Cloud Editor. Misty Cloud, is it too hot? Before Helian Wei Wei had the chance to recover from the joy of her marriage engagement, she was frozen in her steps as she saw the man that she was about to marry, intimately holding another girl in his arms. Moreover, that girl was not a stranger, it was her younger sister who shared the same father as her half-sister, Helian Jiao Er. Helian Jiao Er was delicately holding a tea-cup in her hands, smiling meekly and shook her head gently, her face flushed as red as a tomato. Wei Wei felt as if an icy needle was slowly pricking her heart, as she felt a piercing pain while looking at the scene unfolding before her. This unspeakable pain led Wei Wei to take a large step forward. Jiao Er immediately shrunk back, fear was showed on her delicate small face, with a trembling voice, she cried out. "Elder sister, let me explain." "There's no need to explain." The man stood up, his handsome face showed a cold indifference as he patted Helian Jiao Er on the shoulder, and softly said. "There is nothing to explain to this evil woman." Wei Wei's face paled, stepping back quickly. "Evil woman, huh, you called me an evil woman." She had waited for him for 7 years. 7 years of persistent waiting, and this was the end result. "What you've done, you know it full well." His tone was ice-cold and ruthless, his eyes were full of disgust when he looked at her. "I thought you were just young and naive, but now it seems, that is not the case. Jian Er is so kind-hearted, yet you have the heart to be so ruthless. Helian Wei Wei, your rudeness and insolence should have a limit." Helian Jiao Er weakly tugged at the man's sleeve. "Your Highness, it is Jiao Er's fault, elder sister loves your Highness too much, hence she treated Jiao Er as such, Jiao Er. Jiao Er can endure, Doviko." She was crying as she spoke, biting her small lips weakly as she looked at him with her red eyes filled with tears. This look was one that was seeking grievances. After seeing this, the man completely lost his patience, with a flourish of his long sleeves, he threw a piece of paper in Wei Wei's face. On that piece of paper, was only one word. Annulment. Wei Wei's hands started to tremble, her eyes felt as if they were stung, as an uncomfortable burning sensation welled up. That man did not even give her a second look, and he gently led Jiao Er towards the study, as if standing behind him is not a person anymore, but an animal. Ha, no wonder, the original purpose of Master Murong was to pass her the anuher, or else, how would he make a specific trip to the front hall? Helian Mei, who always found joy in bullying Helian Wei Wei, reached out and snatched the divorce paper, gloating gleefully as she relished the moment of taking pleasure in this moment of misfortune. By this time, Helian Jiao Er had returned after sending that man away. When she came back, she looked at the words on the paper and snickered. With one hand, she threw it in Wei Wei's face as she leaned forward, and she used the other hand to grab at Wei Wei's hair and pulled her head back forcefully. "Aren't you usually so arrogant? I would like to see you try now." With her shy demeanor gone, Jiao Er grabbed Wei Wei's hair as she pushed Wei Wei's head several times on the table, knocking it without holding anything back. "Now that your marriage engagement with His Highness is cancelled, I would like to see what you can do, bitch. Elder sister, no need to waste your breath on her, with such wishful thinking, this bitch is simply like a mangy dog following His Highness around all day. All you need to do is to teach her a proper lesson and let her clearly know her place." "You are right." Helian Jiao Er sneered, with her outstretched hand, she reached out once again and threw Wei Wei's head into the water urn that was at the side. The water urn was full of water, and when Helian Wei Wei's head was fully immersed in the water, she started choking and gasping for air. Wei Wei struggled with all her might to get out, but unfortunately she was not strong enough. With a momentary slip, her entire body fell into the water urn. Helian Jiao Er didn't seem satisfied, and she grabbed Wei Wei's hair again, pulling her out and continued dunking her head in. "You dare fight with me? Can't you do some self-reflection? You are really so disgusting, can't you tell, he has long since gotten tired of you. And yet you keep clinging on to his highness, really so shameless. Waves of pain seared through Helian Wei Wei's scalp after all that brutal tugging from Helian Jiao Air. She felt as if a layer of skin had been peeled off as a burning and raw sensation assaulted her. As she swallowed huge gulps of icy cold water, she coughed and sputtered while desperately gasping for air. She was distraught as she struggled with her might, however, soon the light in her eyes began to dim. Seeing this, Helian Jiao Air's eyes flashed a dangerous glint, and said the words that had been buried deep in her heart. "Younger sister, why don't we just throw this evil woman into the river? We can then say that she had decided to take her own life after she received the annulment letter." The voices of the two people were growing more and more distant, until all that was heard was a big splash. The sound of a loud splash as her whole world slowly became engulfed in silence as she was submerged in the water. Finally free from those voices that made her so bitter. But she was simply unwilling to let go. If someone would help regain what was rightfully hers, she was willing to sacrifice everything. Wei Wei's eyes were starting to lose focus as her surroundings seemed to get darker and darker. Her eyes were overflowing with tears and soon she saw huge gates that did not seem to belong to her world. Feeling pain slowly radiating throughout her body, and a faint incessant sobbing beside her, Helian Wei Wei felt that she was pulled out from the darkness that surrounded her. The moment she opened her eyes, the scenery before her surprised her greatly. A little bridge above a clear flowing stream, majestic pavilions with cobbled stone walkways, and an elderly woman who donned on an ancient dress was kneeling and sobbing next to her. When she noticed that she was awake, the woman immediately laughed, looking relieved amidst all the tears as she struggled to stifle her sobs. She quickly wiped the tears away. Helian Wei Wei stared at her without moving, as if in a trance. Her expression turning grave by each passing moment. The elderly woman looked at her in that state, and the smile on her face turned to a worried and nervous expression as she tensed up and quickly asked. "Young miss, what happened to you? Are you all right? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" Wei Wei did not speak, she stayed quiet for a moment and her gaze turned icy as she looked straight at the elderly woman. The elderly woman was shocked to see the look in Wei Wei's eyes. She spoke with a shudder. "Young miss, you aren't able to say anything, this isn't good. What are we to do? This old slave will go look for master in the study, you are the only blood of the Helian house. Even if he is so heartless, he still has to do something, he can't be so ungrateful to this extent. To actually bite the hand that feeds one. This is too much. Master. To bite the hand that feeds one." Wei Wei's eyes sank, surely this has got to be a joke. Who was so daring to make a fool her, the renowned mercenary queen? They were simply seeking their deaths. Wei Wei moved a little, she just wanted to stand up, but a myriad of flashbacks suddenly raced through her mind. A huge chunk of memory that did not belong to her flooded her mind and a large amount of information made her dizzy and nauseous. These memories belonged to another person, and they started from a babbling baby to a young girl of 15 years old. It comprised of very messy and incomplete memories, and for Helian Wei Wei, it opened up a completely strange new world. This place was completely different from 21st century. It was an ancient world where everyone was ruled by an emperor. In this new world, those with martial arts are highly respected, the one whose fist is hardest is the one with the right to speak. As a renowned mercenary queen, Wei Wei could not believe that after rousing from her sleep, she was brought into this world in such a ridiculous manner. What's more, she had actually transmigrated into the body of such a young girl. Chapter 2. Rebirth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Misty Cloud Editor. Misty Cloud. What made Helian Wei Wei want to cry was that there were no historical records of this world she knew of. It was totally foreign to her. From the memories that invaded her mind, she learned that she was now in the War Dragon Empire. And this body that she now resided in, held a prestigious name, as the eldest miss of one of the great four-war Dragon Empire family clans. With such a powerful background, one should be able to strut around with her head held high. However, after the death of her grandfather, her father took a concubine as his second wife, forgetting the promise he made when he married into the Hellion family. He had sworn an oath and promised that no one would ever replace her mother's place, or he would be struck by lightning. The concubine had tearfully told everyone that Hellion Wei Wei's mother was too domineering and she could not tolerate her. But later that year, her mother's illness took a turn for the worse and she was unable to leave her bed. Finally, depression took hold of her and she passed away. And thus, generations of the Hellion family empire fell into the hands of an outsider. She, the rightful heir of the family, was too young to tell good and evil apart, let alone having the wisdom to see the deception that lay within the household. She felt that the concubine had her interests at heart because she never hit nor scolded her. Not knowing the most insidious plan of all that was to kill her. After the concubine took over the household, she brought Hellion Wei Wei up to become an arrogant and witless lady. Wei Wei got into trouble all the time, but the concubine never intervened. Finally, anyone who took one look at her, were only ever disgusted by her temper and her hateful face. They said that she was not worthy to be the heir and that she sought something that she was not worthy of. Wei Wei's marriage plans were in jeopardy because everyone believed that she bullied her younger half-sister Hellion Jiao heir who now may be married before her. That scheming couple. Both her father and that cheap mistress, what a show they had both. If it weren't for her vicious stepmother and half-sister, she would have not lost her standing in society and become a despised love-struck good.4.nothing person. Love-struck. Good.4.nothing, this was not who she was. I'm fine, said Hellion Wei Wei as she held on to the elderly woman, the sound of her voice concealed her true feelings. Over the years, she had learned to quickly calm her thoughts wherever she was, and assess the situation at hand. Even though the power of the Hellion family was in the hands of an outsider, her father had spared Wei Wei's life. He had to keep up the pretense of a court minister from a prestigious family, and not be known as ungrateful and ruthless one who would not even spare his own flesh and blood. On the contrary, because he was a hypocrite, he had to watch his actions and could not overstep the boundaries. Wei Wei knew that in a household where she held no power, she brought shame to her family name. Hence, many chose to be on her younger half-sister Hellion Jiao heir's side. She didn't even have the right to attend family functions. How ridiculous, considering she was the only living heir of the Hellion family. If she weren't the heir, she would have killed herself ages ago. Wei Wei truly had no one she could count on. It seems, her situation was indeed quite precarious. Pursing her lips, Wei Wei's eyes narrowed as she analyzed her current situation. She was a good.4.nothing with no one she could trust, with her stepmother and half-sisters watchful eyes on her all the time. This was really a pickle she was in. Since young miss is all right, then you should get up quickly. We have honored guests in the house. If those rich young heirs saw the state you are in, your reputation would be. Mei Gu's words was interrupted by sounds of footsteps nearby and Hellion Jiao heir cried out, I remember the jade was still on my hand when I left, how could it be missing now? Sister, do not worry, when we left, the good.4.nothing was still here. Now that the jade is missing, she must have taken it. Let's go and confront her now, we can't have her bullying you all the time, said Hellion Mei. She turned around, with a group of ladies from influential families following her in her stride as they walked towards the pond, staring fiercely at Hellion Wei Wei. If it weren't for the servants who reported back, she would not have known that the good.4.nothing was so blessed with life, that she couldn't even drown. All the ladies looked at Hellion Wei Wei dripping from head to toe, they covered their smirks with their fans and asked mockingly, what's the matter Wei Wei? Even if no one in the world wished to marry you, you didn't need to try to take your life and make yourself so miserable. Even though she was ridiculed by the ladies, she did not make the slightest effort to get up. With her left leg slightly curved, she stretched out her hand to sweep her drenched long locks of hair behind her ears. An ordinary action, but made by her seemed almost arrogant with an indescribably dignified air to it. Staring firmly at Hellion Jiao, she asked, "Is this what you want?" "Elder sis, I don't know what you mean." "I only came here to look for my jade," said Hellion Jiao pitifully, biting at her lips, eyes brimming full of tears. Hellion Wei felt a burst of sneer through her heart. What a master actress she was. Everyone knew that in ancient times, chaste was more important than your life. For her failed betrothment, Hellion Wei had already become the laughing stock of the capital. Now that she's wet through and surrounded by so many people, it will no doubt cause a commotion and the young heirs in the study will be disturbed. Not only did Hellion Jiao want to rob her of her marriage proposal, she wanted to destroy her life thoroughly. Hellion Jiao felt a burst of guilty conscience upon her elder sister's questioning. However, she looked at Wei with pitiful eyes and her voice holding back tears as she answered, "Elder sister, you can vent your frustration, but why do you have to accuse me?" Hellion Mei embraced Jiao as she burst into tears. Hellion Mei shouted angrily, "This is so unjust. You think that you can bully us just because of your status, are you not afraid to suffer retribution from God?" The daughters of the distinguished families looked at Hellion Wei, their eyes are filled with disdain and disgust, as if they were looking down at the mud on their shoes that they couldn't clean off. Hellion Wei crossed her arms and pursed her lips, staring at the pair of sisters acting their hearts out. With her experience, this matter will not be resolved so easily. Sure enough, just as the mummers around her were fading, Hellion Jiao cried out, "Elder sister, what is that shiny thing on you?" Instantly, Hellion Mei shouted loudly, her voice filled with contempt, "Could it be the jade? See, I told you she took it. Hellion Wei, you knew the jade belongs to second sister, and yet you still took it and hid it. This is stealing. I'm going to slap you." She rushed over to Hellion Wei immediately with her hands out ready to slap her. But before she reached Hellion Wei's side, a crisp clap resounded splendidly and stopped her in her tracks. Chapter 3. Mysterious Man. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Misty Cloud Editor. Misty Cloud. Hellion Mei clutched the left side of her face, and looked incredulously at the woman who was coming at her and thought, "This woman has gone crazy," and spat out, "Slut, you dare hit me, you!" Slap. Another crisp slap resounded. Hellion Wei's clothes blew in the wind, she pursed her lips, and called out in an icy tone, "Younger sister." Everyone was stunned for a moment. This had all happened so quickly that they couldn't react, and they weren't sure who exactly she was addressing. BL.net. Hellion Wei lightly smiled at Hellion Mei's confused expression, as she gently blew on her fingertips, smilingly opening her mouth and said, "Perhaps my dear younger sister can go and ask around, in this city which concubine's daughter actually has the audacity to talk back to the main wife's eldest daughter. If you don't want your life, you can just tell me. You. How can you qualify yourself as the eldest daughter? You're just cheap trash." Hellion Mei clenched her teeth, obviously not convinced. Ugh. Hellion Wei suddenly turned around, and her left hand had swiftly grasped Hellion Mei's delicate neck. A dangerous glint in her eyes seemed to have been ignited as she looked at her. "It seems that you don't want to be able to speak again." Hellion Wei sneered, her tousled damp hair framed her exquisite face and she was like a demoness that had just emerged from the depths of the ocean, and an icy cold aura that could freeze everybody around her. With Hellion Wei's intense gaze, no one dared to step forward, they couldn't help but feel afraid from the bottom of their hearts. That kind of chill they felt tingling down their backs were as if hell had frozen over, and any time they too, could be frozen to death. Hellion Jiao was watching everything from a bit further away and her expression sank. What had happened to this waste? They were actually threatened by a girl who had no cultivation. And she had the cheek to prattle on some nonsense. However, before she could retort, she heard a low and dignified voice from behind sternly asking, "What is all this?" Everybody looked at the person who said the words. He was the head of the family, Hellion Guangyao. He wasn't alone, behind him were a few other noble sons from distinguished families. Within them, even the person who had just annulled their wedding engagement, Morong Changfeng, was there. He was wearing a dark blue fur coat, a handsome face that was clean and notable. Especially those phoenix eyes, they were like an ancient ink stone, deep and stoic, people couldn't pull their eyes away from him. Helian Wei glanced swept by all the ladies and saw that they were simply staring at him with infatuated gazes, with a slight tinge of blush. She started to take a good look at the man standing before her and realized why the previous Wei was so obsessed with him. This man had the looks, no wonder, this man could make almost any girl go crazy for him without doing anything. Only, she could see that what he held for her was utter contempt and disdain. This could all be seen with a simple gaze from him. A man was watching all of this a distance away as he sat by the river bank, leisurely sipping his tea. His robe was casually draped over, with his eyebrows raised in interest, as he slowly put down his priceless blue and white bone china teacup. Beneath his silver mask, he eluded an oppressive aura that would make anyone want to surrender. He was watching the whole scene unfold as he brushed his robe lightly. His calm and carefree demeanor revealed a glint of lazy charm, his lips curved up into an enigmatic smile while his eyes reflected a hint of mirth in them. On the other side, Helian Mei's face had started to swell and she angrily glared at Helian Wei. Helian Jiao looked at Helian Wei, with reddish eyes, tears at the tip of her lashes. Helian Guangyao's favorite daughter was Helian Jiao. Seeing her wronged, he got really angry, and he flourished his large sleeves towards Helian Wei with obvious disgust and said, "What exactly is going on?" "Father." Helian Mei called out in an aggrieved tone while clutching her face. She then angrily said, "Second sister lost her jade and just now the only other person there was eldest sister. It's obvious that the jade was taken by her but she still denied it and even hit me." Helian Jiao put on an aggrieved expression and gently tugged on Helian Mei's sleeves. She shook her head and said, "Third sister, don't say any more. It's just a piece of jade, if eldest sister likes it that much, then just give it to her. It's just that I'll be letting father down as that the piece of jade was the one father had painstakingly got from the western region. I usually can't bear to wear it on normal days and I only wear it on special occasions. I'll have to trouble eldest sister to take extra care of it, from time to time, please wipe it down with spring water. As for your face, when we go back, let me put on some ointment on it. Don't disturb eldest sister any further that we don't have the right to." The more she said, the angrier Helian Guangyao got. For so many years he had been tolerating Helian Wei's antics and whims. To Helian Guangyao, Helian Wei was a black mark in his life that he was ashamed of. It is because of this waste's existence that he was constantly reminded that he isn't the true heir and that he was just the son-in-law that married into the Helian family. And now she actually dared to bother his beloved daughter. Today, if he didn't put Helian Wei in her place he would not be able to suppress the insurmountable anger that dwelled within. Helian Guangyao raised his whip and shot it towards Helian Wei. Helian Wei's eyes narrowed and she swiftly kicked the whip aside. Helian Guangyao was surprised, he didn't think that his eldest daughter who was trash could make such moves. "Helian Wei. You. Humph. You even dare to be disobedient to father." Helian Wei laughed, "I don't want to be beaten for no reason, how is that disobedience? Eldest sister, even up till now you haven't given up." Helian Mei rushed over, her eyes open wide, "Second sister have already seen that you have something shiny on you." Helian Wei's thin lips curled up into a sneer. "You mean to say that anything that's shiny is jade? Then why don't you say that all that glitters is gold? Then I'm sure the unique luster of gaudy riches exuding so explosively from your entire being must be so irresistibly charming to all." The ladies surrounding them couldn't help but laugh out. Helian Mei has always liked to wear gold and silver, before they just thought that she dressed up brightly but now that they took another look, it was really a bit too heavy and garish for their taste. "Eldest sister. Don't bully third sister any further. Hellion Jiao looked up innocently, her beautiful face showing pity. A family in harmony will prosper. Next time if you see anything you like, just tell me, there's no need to make father so angry. When he heard this, Hellion Guangyao held the whip even tighter and angrily said, enough. Hellion Wei Wei, if you aren't going to own up, then get out. As one of the esteemed protectors of our kingdom, we cannot tolerate any thieves. Get out. Hellion Wei Wei's raised her eyebrows and smiled chillingly. I shouldn't need to mention it, but all of you seem to have forgotten that I, Hellion Wei Wei, am the real successor of the Hellion family, and you are merely the son-in-law that married in. Chapter 4. Illustrious Ghost Palace. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Misty Cloud Editor. Misty Cloud, you. Hellion Guangyao bellowed, his body trembling intensely from intense rage. No longer caring about the presence of all the other distinguished noble sons and daughters, he raised his hand and slapped Hellion Wei Wei. Slap. Hellion Guangyao's palm landed heavily on Wei Wei's cheek. He had slapped her in his fit of anger without holding anything back. Even though Wei Wei could have dodged, she didn't evade it, rather she just stood there, and took the slap. She looked at him with a cold glint in her eye. So this is how you express your gratitude, failing to make a distinction between right and wrong, and letting your beloved daughter slander me. While talking, she threw away what she was holding in her hands in an upright manner, her eyes shone with a hint of justice. At that moment, it seems to have stirred up the heart of the people. Hearing Wei Wei's words, everyone's heart was shocked. As they looked at Hellion Guangyao, everyone had some reservations about him. Hellion Guangyao's face twisted with anger, but couldn't retort to what Wei Wei had said. This was also the reason why Wei Wei didn't evade when he slapped her, even though she could have. She wanted to expose the vile things this scum has done in the past, not giving him the slightest chance of fighting back. It was obvious that Hellion Guangyao was so angry to the point that he felt lightheaded. Everything happened too quickly that he wasn't prepared, or did he have the chance to see the foreshadow of what Wei Wei wanted to do. So in that moment, he wasn't able to react to what just happened. But that didn't mean that Hellion Jiao won't fight back. With her eyes cast down, only after a few seconds passed, did she finally react. With a soft and sweet voice, she cooed. Since eldest sister insists that she's being wronged, then why don't we let the slaves investigate this matter, and return her innocence? When they heard the solution, they all nodded in agreement, thinking that the second miss was very kind-hearted. Even in this situation, she didn't forget to give her a few steps for retreat. But with a single glance, Hellion Wei Wei could see the malicious intent hidden in Hellion Jiao's eyes. Return justice to me. Ha! That sounds too nice. She was probably thinking of another way to add insults to her. Right now, she was dripping wet, and if she let those men touch her, how was she going to survive in the future? Looks like little sister really want to force me into a difficult situation. Hellion Jiao bowed down her head and said. I just want to return eldest sister's innocence. Since you keep insisting that you've been wronged, you're not afraid of being searched, right? What if you aren't able to find what you're looking for, then what? Wei Wei said coldly. Hellion Jiao smiled. If we cannot find the jade, Jiao will personally kneel down and serve you tea as an apology. Jiao didn't believe that this woman would let people touch her. Little sister must remember what you just said. Wei Wei lips curved into a smile, like a gallant queen who had just stepped out. Those people don't need to search me, I'll search myself in front of you and the others. After saying that, with a swish, she unfastened her outer lace belt, stretched out her arms and shook. In a flash, she had turned her sleeves inside out. After that she deftly shook and turned and emptied both left and right side, front and back was also empty. Don't even mention a high-class jade pendant, not even a shiny object was found. Everyone gasped. Because no one would have thought that Wei Wei would be this bold, and removed her outer robes in front of this crowd. Was she planning not to get married in the future? However, these people would never understand. Wei Wei had never cared about her reputation. If you want to be successful, treat other people ruthlessly, treat yourself even more mercilessly. Hellion Jiao Er shocked, speechless. How was this possible? She was certain that she hid the jade on Wei Wei's body, as a backup plan. But where was the jade? At that moment Hellion Jiao Er's face paled. Originally Wei Wei's hair was already long, now without her outer clothing, her hair flowed down and reached below her waist. As her silky long black hair which cascaded down alluringly, it seemingly made her look like a mermaid who had went ashore. Her lips arched into a smile, every word was cold and clear. Little sister, aren't you supposed to kneel now? Instantly, the courtyard became eerily quiet. Everyone raised their head and glanced at Hellion Wei Wei, only to see a frail young lady but had on a domineering aura. These two created a huge contrast, and with this cold oppressing aura, no one dared to underestimate her. Hellion Jiao Er was like a branch in the winter, trembling non-stop. What now? She was going to live in royal palace in the future. If she kneeled today, no matter how glorious her future was, she won't be able to erase this humiliation. But if she doesn't kneel, under the watchful eyes of these distinguished guests, and if word got out, her reputation was still going to be ruined. Was she really going to kneel down before this bitch? As if already knowing Hellion Jiao Er's dilemma, Wei Wei's eyes showed a slight ridicule. She watched Hellion Jiao Er slowly bend her knees, and just as she was about to kneel down. Right at this moment, a pair of hands had stretched out, stopping her. Just because there's nothing in the outer robe, it doesn't mean that the jade is not hidden inside. The investigation is not over, so why does she need to kneel and apologize? Murong Changfeng said as his tone was filled with justice as he looked up, and as the sunlight gently touched his handsome face, he stood out even more, making him even more suave. Hellion Jiao Er shot a loving gaze at Changfeng, young noble. Everyone knew that if Murong Changfeng had not stepped in, Hellion Jiao Er could only kneel. But now Murong Changfeng had helped her, and had pushed all the suspicion back to Wei Wei. Even facing all these spiteful faces, Wei Wei didn't back down. Instead, her back became even straighter, her sleeves billowing in the wind, looking radiantly captivating. Before turning 7, this body was pampered by all. Her parents were still alive then, and her martial arts was improving quickly, and she was hailed as a genius. After turning 7, her grandfather passed away, her mother became sick, and Hellion Guangyao brought her stepmother in. In just one night, she had lost everything, her cultivation, familial love and her position. In a short period of time, Hellion Wei Wei became the trash that everyone had casted aside. They detested her haughty temperament, claimed that she bullied commoners, and abused her aunt. She ignored all these, because she did not care, because she knew she still had him. Yet Wei Wei didn't think that when she turned 7 and did the innate test, everything crumbled, along with Changfeng's affection. She was going to make him regret, this Murong Changfeng doesn't deserve her affection. What young noble said is right, even though the jade is not hidden outside doesn't mean it's not hidden inside. The problem was supposed to end, but knowing Hellion Mei and the others had always been more shameless, which meant that from the beginning, they had already set their minds on Wei Wei's death today. Since they had already framed her, then they would do it to the end. But Hellion Wei Wei only had that one piece of clothing left on her, if she continued to remove. However, before everyone's attention had turned back to Hellion Wei Wei's clothes, a luxurious white robe with black gold cloud embroidery gently floated down, and covered Wei Wei's slender body. Unexpectedly it became her stunning battle robe. After noticing the robe, Hellion Guangyao's face instantly changed. Even the noble ladies couldn't sit still, looking excited as they looked left and right. The ladies' eyes were suddenly filled with shyness, and was also filled happiness that's hard to discern. Not able to control their faces, as they all had on a slight blush. Faintly, Wei Wei heard Aunt Mei softly say, "It's His Third Highness, the Ghost Palace came." Chapter 5. Beam under the knot. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Misty Cloud Editor. Misty Cloud Ghost Palace. Helian Wei Wei raised her eyebrow. She vaguely remembered this man from her memory. He was a special existence in the Dragon War Empire. He had advanced to 10th rank, and became the #1 martial arts genius. The distinguished third prince, his future was supposed to be immeasurable, when the world was right in front of him. There was a fire in the palace, and he lost all of his cultivation. Coincidentally, that day was the 7th month of the lunar calendar, which was also the Ghost Festival. That was how the title, Ghost Palace, came about. He seldom stepped out of his palace, and his very existence became shrouded in a mystery. Many people were eager to get close to him, because all the people that he had advised, all advanced in their cultivation very quickly in a short span of time. Yet deep in the depths of their hearts, no one truly dared get too close to him, as they had a trace of fear buried within. Thud, 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 his unhurried footsteps, calm yet rhythmical, were getting closer. Helian Wei Wei saw Helian Mei, who was standing at the side trembling slightly. As she looked up, she saw the silhouette of a slender-bodied man at the end of the river, his silver mask glistening in the sun. Though he had not spoken a word, he exuberated an air of nobility and class. What he was wearing had a complicated embroidery and showed exquisite workmanship. His long sleeves draped and lightly touched the floor, and created a cool breeze with each step he took. As he drew near, his footsteps gradually came to a stop. His bright red clothing and his pale-colored neck created a drastic contrast. And suddenly, it felt like the cold gaze from his phoenix eyes could outshine all the colors. Perhaps it wasn't just his eyes. His entire being was emitting a dangerous aura, making the people incapable of ignoring his presence. From the moment he appeared, everything around him seemed to fade away, ceasing to exist. This humble servant did not know about your Royal Highness's arrival. Please pardon my negligence. Helian Guangyao stepped out quickly and bowed his head. The noble ladies who stood by the side also bowed to His Highness, gazing at him shyly. Helian Guangyao did know how long he had been there, and how much he had overheard, thinking only about what to say next. Your Highness. Bailey Jia Ju ignored Helian Guangyao and asked, "What do you think of my robe?" As he casually glanced at everyone who was present. His voice was like a void that was entrenched in coldness, yet a little low that was pleasant to the ears, as if it was a finely tuned instrument, but it still could not mask his menacing aura. The confused people looked at each other, not understanding the meaning behind what he just said. Silence filled the air, and nobody moved. Helian Guangyao took it upon himself to ease the tense atmosphere. Your Highness, I heard that you prefer tranquil and quiet environments. There are too many people here. Why don't we head over to the study instead? Bailey Jia Ju elegantly played with the dagger in his hands and said, I asked, what all of you think of my robe. Master Helian must be getting old and didn't hear what I just said. Everyone was shocked and froze. How is it? He pointed the dagger at Helian Mei's tearful face. Helian Mei shuddered and immediately knelt on the floor in fear, stuttering, Third Prince, please have mercy. Bailey Jia Ju didn't even glance at her. Even Helian Jiao Er, who was a devastating beauty, was met with a cold indifference. Just when everyone thought he was leaving. Suddenly, Bailey Jia Ju stopped in front of Helian Wei Wei. He stood under the sunlight, with his head held high, his dark eyes proud and aloof. He looked straight into Helian Wei Wei's eyes and he asked, what do you think? Mississippi, Aunt May tugged Helian Wei Wei's sleeves, afraid that she would be impulsive and offend this horrid man. But Helian Wei Wei did not seem to mind, her lips curved into a smile, not bad, it's very comfortable and warm. Really? Bailey Jia Ju asked nonchalantly. Without any warning, he held her chin up and looked at her tanned face, his tone had a dangerous vibe, you're not so bad yourself too. Everyone gasped, especially Helian Jiao Er who stood by the side. She clenched her hands tightly, her eyes were filled with vicious intent and jealousy. Helian Wei Wei raised her eyebrow, and calmly pondered the man in front of her. be it his movement or posture, it all emitted an elegance that every woman can't help but be attracted to. The only problem is, the person he was bewitching was her. Hellion Wei Wei did not back away, nor show the slightest bit of nervousness, she just softly smiled. Her gaze was clear and steadfast as she stared straight at Bailey Jia Ju, and looked at him from head to toe as if appraising an item. Then she imitated the man's movement, as she gripped his chin in an even more alluring way, and lazily replied, "You're not bad too." Damn it, the mask felt cool and hard in her hands, not fun at all. This man wore this mask all day, either his appearance was that ugly, or he just had a weird hobby. Hellion Wei Wei cursed in her heart, his delicate face did not reveal any emotion, but rather an air of cool arrogance. Just as Aunt May recovered from the shock of Bailey Jia Ju's unexpected actions, hearing Miss provoking His Highness, it made her cry out in exasperation. Now was not the time for making jokes. Did her miss not know who this man was? Bailey Jia Ju stared at Hellion Wei Wei, he slowly narrowed his eyes. His dark and cold glare was like an icy blizzard engulfing the earth, pressuring everyone and stopped everyone in their tracks. It felt as if everything had frozen around them. In the dark, several attendants broke out in cold sweat, trembling in fear, not daring to make a sound. Because they were not sure how their master was going to react. Was he going to kill Hellion Wei Wei, or kill everyone in the household? The first scenario was plausible. After all, years ago, there was a female servant who wanted to climb the ranks and snuck into their master's bed. She got slapped and was sent to the army. As for the second situation, "Master, please calm down, no matter what, it is still the general's residence. If the emperor knew you killed the whole Hellion clan, he will come and play with our lives." Chapter 6. Taking advantage of His Highness. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Misty Cloud Editor. Misty Cloud. Bailey Jia Ju narrowed his eyes dangerously. He had lived for so many years, but this was his first time being taken advantage of by a girl. Thinking on his usual interactions with the people around him, the usual reactions were fear or baseless flattering. Bailey Jia Ju furrowed his brows. Now that there was someone here to topple the scales, it broke free of the usual behaviors that he was used to. However, this didn't mean that this little thing that didn't know the difference between life and death could be so bold. She was really seeking death. Hellion Jiao looked his way, and softly said, "Your Highness, please calm down. Elder sister didn't mean to make you angry." His Highness must also have heard the rumors about elder sister. What she said was rather bold. When she mentioned the word bold, the implied meaning behind the word was understood by all. Many of these noble ladies knew that Hellion Wei Wei was full of antics and had done so many disgraceful things, and now that those deeds have come to the surface, they gave her undisguised glances, full of contempt. When Bailey Jia Ju heard this, his lips hooked up and he looked at her. His emotions were unfathomable. Hellion Jiao shyly lowered her head when she saw his reaction. As the famed War Dragon Empire's talented and beauty, she confidently thought that no man could escape from her grasp. Moreover, this was the person in her heart, so she smiled sweetly. Bailey Jia Ju looked at Hellion Jiao and smiled. It was a gentle smile, but there was a hint of mirth in it. Hellion Jiao didn't know it, but she was already drawn in her own world, fantasizing that he would turn and take the initiative to talk to her. Bailey Jia Ju turned back, as he reached out and lifted Hellion Wei Wei's chin slightly, in an ambiguous posture, looking as if he was going to kiss her any time. How could this be? Didn't he hear what she just said? That bitch was just intolerable. Hellion Jiao was very jealous, and clenched her hand so hard that her nails were digging into her flesh and made her bleed. However, Bailey Jia Ju turned a blind eye to everything else, as he leaned in closer, so close that Hellion Wei Wei could smell the faint smell of sandalwood. The indescribable smell was tickling her nose. "Woman, remember that you provoked me first." He said that threateningly in a deep voice, so close to her ear that his lips almost brushed past. He then flourished his sleeves and turned to leave. Hellion Wei Wei wrinkled her brows and looked at the man who was walking away, a glint in her eyes. Bailey Jia Ju slowly walked out, the sunlight shone on him as his radiance seemed to be captivating and he seemed not of this world even after he was long gone, the pressure of his aura remained. After a long time, Aunt May let out a heavy sigh of relief, and said, "Miss, how could you speak like that to the ghost palace?" "I say what I want to say." Hellion Wei Wei was too lazy to bother anymore as she stretched her waist, and faintly said, "Aunt May, we should go back." Aunt May hesitated and said, "But miss, the injury on your forehead. Rest assured, this injury doesn't hurt." Hellion Wei Wei had had worse injuries in her previous life, now that she had just arrived on this in this new world, she wouldn't rest until she made her enemies pay for what they did to her. After passing Bailey Jia Ju, Hellion Guanyin turned around to see his daughter leaving as his heart felt uncertain. Was this his waste of a daughter? But Hellion Guan Yao, who didn't put Hellion Wei Wei in his eyes, didn't think too much about it, as he turned to look at Murong Chang Feng. Murong Chang Feng was absent-mindedly looking in the direction where Hellion Wei Wei just left in, he didn't know what to think. "Master, what is the eldest Hellion miss up to now? What kind of tricks is she playing at?" "See she," a small boy serving under Murong Chang Feng as a scholar's study who stood beside him asked, his tone full of confidence, even his eyes mirrored what he said as he said it out loud in an arrogant manner. In the past that lady was always trying all means and ways to stick to his master, why was she acting like this today? She disappeared without even glancing in his master's direction, this was simply too odd. "What do you think?" Murong Chang Feng looked away from Hellion Wei Wei and said with a heavy tone. "See," she cried out in exasperation, she was so close to the Lord, now it is the opposite, she is clearly playing hard to get. Hearing this, Murong Chang Feng stopped speaking, his handsome face had on a look of disgust. Hellion Guan Yao saw his face and laughingly said, "Please do not bother about that daughter of mine who doesn't know the world, as for Jiao Er, I would need you to help me take good care of her." Murong Chang Feng glanced at Hellion Jiao Er, and saw her looking at the ground shyly, smiled and said, "General Hellion, please rest assured, Jiao Er is already a student of the White Academy, by virtue of her martial skills, as long as she wins the annual White Academy competition, I will naturally introduce her to my master and see if she has the opportunity to join the Martial Arts Division." Martial Arts Division. Hellion Jiao Er was really surprised, her face lit up. The Martial Arts Division was the elite force of martial artists, while there they would at least double their strength. But the people who could get into it were few because each person had to be the best of the best, and have a certain amount of strength and talent to be able to join. If she could have a renowned master to give her pointers. Hellion Jiao Er raised her eyes in determination. Last year's competition, young master was also present. Those competitors were only a year difference in terms of age. "I am confident that I can win this competition." Hellion Guan Yao nodded, stroked his beard, if she got to the championships then he would be very proud. On the other side, Hellion Wei Wei returned to her abode, but instead of heading back to her room, she went over to the courtyard and narrowed her eyes as her gaze rested at the corner. Since her mother had died, she had abandoned this courtyard. It was actually a very good location, in winter it was warm and in the summer it was cool, it was locked up since the demise of her mum. In it, was a field of red flowers. It was time for them to see the sun. Hellion Wei Wei took the key off her necklace and opened the lock. Aunt May hastily said, "Miss, didn't you say that you will have a nightmare when you open it? There won't be any more in the future." Hellion Wei Wei said, her eyes shining brightly. She walked to the study, the furnishings had changed, her grandfather's favorite rocking chair had been sold by the sous. Today's Hellion mansion was a shadow of its former self. Hellion Wei Wei stood in the middle of the old empty study, and trailed her fingers across the bookshelf, feeling the cool wood. There must have been somebody who searched in here. The furnishings in the room were arranged in a complex order, but it wasn't obvious that they were well organized, it was because it was Hellion Wei Wei, had it been anybody else, they would not have noticed it. Because of the subtle details, only experienced people could see through the clues at once. Helian Wei Wei's fingers stopped on an old dilapidated book. She also could not place which year it was written, and she looked at the cover and flipped it open. In it, there were lots of words she couldn't read. When she had opened the book, the wooden windows started to shake violently, as if there was something trying to break through the door. Chapter 7. Handsome Man with Silver Hair. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Misty Cloud Editor. Misty Cloud. Helian Wei Wei turned her head, and saw that in front of her, sunlight was condensing at an impeccable speed, as a burst of colorful rays of light shone in. However, everything was too blinding for her to see clearly what was standing before her. All she could make out was a cascading silver, glistening in the light. A stark contrast to that was the body that donned on a long black robe, emitting a heavy dangerous aura. His broad chiseled chest was partially exposed, his whole being gave off an ice-cold atmosphere. In that moment, the man who was basking under the lights, let out a sigh. Suddenly he broke into laughter. His laughs were filled with excitement and the desire to see the world again. Helian Wei Wei frowned. Her first reaction was, this person was not human. Finally he stopped laughing, turned over, and looked at Helian Wei Wei, as his red lips curved into a smile, displaying his sharp white teeth, and asked, "Are you the one who released this lord?" "Obviously, since you and I are the only people here." Helian Wei Wei closed the book she was holding, crossed her long slender legs, as she leaned on the chair, in a very domineering yet suave posture. The man raised his eyebrow in interest as he asked, "You don't seem to fear me." Just as Helian Wei Wei was going to say something, suddenly his expression changed. He felt a mark imprinting itself to his spine. He narrowed his eyes as an intense wave of pain washed over him, as he felt something suppressing his voice, and growled, "Damn it, what did you do to this lord's body?" Helian Wei Wei shrugged her shoulders. How would she know? She had just teleported here. "It's a contract." "You made a contract with this lord?" The man glared at her, his silver hair drifting with the wind, like a beast about to attack. Helian Wei Wei watched in amusement when she saw a pair of fluffy white wolf ears appear on his head. Her phoenix eyes glimmered in delight. Unable to control herself, she reached out. "You dare! Woman, I'm warning you, if you dare to touch any part of this lord, I will chop off your hands." His domineering eyes squinted, his face was scrunched up in anger. Helian Wei Wei ignored him, and grabbed the pair of wolf ears, and asked excitedly, "It's real?" The man, "What do you think?" "Humph," he sneered. This woman actually went on and ignored him, even insulted his body, and yet she continued to question if his ears were real. He simply couldn't bear it any longer. Helian Wei Wei smirked, "It feels pretty good." "Who asked you how it felt?" He was so angry, his ears twitched. Helian Wei Wei raised her eyebrow and smiled, "Very good, you also know how to act cute." "What the hell is acting cute?" The man gnashed his teeth in anger. Just when he got back his freedom, he fell into the evil claws of a human again. "It's just abominable. It looks like you've been locked up in this ancient book for many years." Helian Wei Wei asked, wanting to fish out some information. The man gloomily replied, 500 years, otherwise why do you think it was so easy to make a contract with me, with your meek powers? You can go. Helian Wei Wei didn't seem to care if he stayed or not. The man's eyes sunk. "If I could go, I would have left already. But since the contract is made already, this lord has to stay by your side. Additionally, I can't disobey you, till I help you fulfill your desires, or my soul would disappear, and unable to reincarnate for life. So, I'm your master now." Helian Wei Wei lifted herself off the chair. Her soft and gentle expression was gone as she straightened her back. This woman's body was obviously fragile and thin, and yet at that moment her body seemed to emit an aura of supremacy. This made the man's eyes widen. The man smiled, thinking that this human was very interesting. "You can interpret it like that too." Suddenly he smiled. There was a glint in his eyes. As vitality was damaged now, if he stayed with the master, it would greatly help his recovery. Also. He is looking forward to see how this girl will achieve her desires. If it's killing people, he would gladly help her. The man licked his lips. This action seems to emit a sinister hostility. Helian Wei nonchalantly flipped through the ancient book in her hands. Since it's like that, tell me, what is your name? Env. My surname is Yuan, name is Ming. His eyes filled with arrogance, silently waiting for the human to fiercely worship him after hearing his name. It's just that. Helian Wei smirked, never heard that name before. You. Yuan Ming glared furiously at Wei, his black eyes sank. Woman, do you feel anything different about your body? After hearing what he said, Helian Wei looked towards the mirror, the originally dark skin peeled off, revealing snow-white skin. Helian Wei was stunned, her fingers gently caressed her chin, suddenly smiled. Interesting. It's very interesting indeed. Yuan Ming smirked. When I just came out, I checked your meridians. According to what I see, you're supposed to be a martial art genius, but your meridians were blocked, veins obstructed. Woman, someone doesn't want you to succeed. After hearing this information, Helian Wei was eerily calm. There's a lot of people who wants me to fail, they're just some insignificant ants. However, can you fix them, my meridians especially? Not only I can fix your meridians, I can give you an extra treasure. I can dispel the poison in your body, and you can start to cultivate once more. Along with the arrogant voice of Yuan Ming, Wei suddenly felt an immense pain from her limbs. Before she was able to ask, she fell into the dark abyss. When she opened her eyes, it was already morning. If it wasn't for the thin layer of sweat covering her forehead, she would have thought that it was just a dream. Yet Wei knew that it wasn't a dream. She flipped the ancient book to a certain page, rows of red words appeared. Contract established, till death. Helian Wei smiled and hugged the ancient book. Damn woman, tightly hugging him, she probably fell in love with him. Yuan Ming awkwardly thought. After grunting twice, he fell into a deep sleep inside the ancient book. Helian Wei slept in an empty courtyard for a night. Aunt May was naturally worried for Wei, but what's more worrying is that she received a letter from the White Academy. Helian Wei, female, 16 years old, cultivation level low, innate talent low, general score barely passed. Due to being absent, we hereby warn you, if you don't go through the admission process in 10 days, we the Academy will completely revoke the qualification. Helian Wei stared at the puzzling letter. Why, if she separated the words, she could understand. But when the words are combined together, it would make her head hurt. Go to school. That wasn't this the ancient time? Where everyone was clamoring to climb up the social ladder through relations. They wanted her, the mercenary queen, to carry a small backpack and go to school. Ha! Carry it there to do what? Blow up the school. Chapter 8. Armament Master Assembly. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Misty Cloud Editor. Misty Cloud, Mississippi. Aunt May noticed her misdelighted yet annoyed gaze. She sighed. This old servant knows that you do not want to enter this academy. That year when the academy was recruiting, you were the first to pass, yet after the test. It's been 8 years, every year when you step into that place, you would be ridiculed and laughed at. But miss, this time you can't delay anymore. If you keep delaying, you won't be able to go there again. Helian Wei softly say, Aunt May, you don't have to worry about it, I know what I'm supposed to do. From the memory fragments she saw that the White Academy was the place she did not want to go to. Not only did she fear all the ridicule, but also due to the fact that when she was 7 years old, she was admitted into the academy and she became instantly famous and she was hailed a genius, creating quite a stir in the city. She felt burdened, worried that she, who lost all her cultivation, won't be able to keep all the glory she brought to her mother, so she kept dawdling to go to the academy. Helian Wei squinted her eyes. Hold on, what's this? Notice for new disciples. School expense 10,000 taels, total of 3 years, on the first day of school the fee must be settled. There's a fee. 10,000 taels. She doesn't even have 1,000. Helian Wei Wei lazily tapped on the wooden table. This was her typical movement when she was thinking. That Su woman was smart with this kind of things, never once had she let her be short on food and clothes, even assigning the servant to send the best silk to her. However, she never gave Helian Wei Wei any money. To outsiders, her stepmother was very generous and benevolent, but it was all just for show. Helian Wei Wei understood it well. If she didn't enter the academy in time, she would lose everything. Because she could only regain the former glory that belonged to her at the academy. When Aunt May saw the exorbitant school fees, she was hesitant, but she stood up and said, "Young miss doesn't need to worry about the school expense. This old servant will go to the main courtyard to find the old master." "No need." Helian Wei Wei randomly placed the letter on the table. "Aunt May, remember this, don't just go looking for that waste for help every time when there's trouble." Helian Wei Wei don't need it." Aunt May's eyes trembled and smiled. "Yes, this old servant won't go any more. Mistress, are you seeing this?" The young miss changed, thoroughly changed. This was the true Helian family bloodline, persistent and dauntless, who fully understood between whom or what to hate or love. But the expense. Aunt May was still concerned about it. Actually, the students who could enter the White Academy were mainly those heirs of nobles and those with authority, so this amount of money was a piece of cake to them. But to Aunt May right now, even if she wanted to, she still couldn't round up this much money. Helian Wei Wei stood up, her black eyes radiated with a tinge of mischievousness. "I have my own way dealing this situation." Aunt May wanted to ask what was she going to do, but seeing the disturbing smile on Helian Wei Wei's face, she just kept quiet. Even though knowing it's not possible, but she still had hope, maybe Miss does have a plan. Noon, Dragon War Empire. The roads crowded with people and carriages, the city bustling with prosperity. Helian Wei Wei leisurely walked on the cobbled stone pavement, listening to the street vendors bartering, experiencing the genuine fact that she was currently living in a totally different era. "Hey, woman, you have been walking for quite some time, aren't you tired?" Yuan Ming, who was in the ancient book, asked, with presumptuous voice. Helian Wei Wei ignored him. Yuan Ming sighed heavily. Wait till he recovered all his cultivation. The first thing he would do was to teach this woman a lesson. She was too arrogant, not cute at all. "Hey, did you hear? The Phoenix Loft is looking for an armament master. The winner will receive 10,000 silver taels. This is a once-in-several-years opportunity. I have never met an armament master." 10,000 silver taels. Hearing this, Helian Wei Wei stopped, her lips curved into a smile. One could be searching high and low, and yet by a lucky stroke of luck, the item could easily be found. Coincidentally, she was in need of money. Why not go to this assembly to check out if she could get some money? "I don't care about any armament master, usually they are very old, so there's nothing worth my time to look at, no eye candy at all." Helian Wei Wei smiled while walking, as she said it dismissively. Yuan Ming nearly vomited blood out after hearing what she said. When people hear the two words, armament master, one would only think if they could get a suitable armament for themselves. But not her, she only cared about the person's looks. "Woman, can you be a bit more serious?" If she continued to be this indifferent, when could he recover his cultivation? Helian Wei Wei innocently replied, "I'm very serious." "Where is your seriousness?" Yuan Ming weakly retorted. Helian Wei Wei raised her eyebrow. "I'm very serious about earning my school expense." "School expense? What's that?" "You mean it's more important than gaining a new armament?" He really couldn't understand what this woman was simply thinking. Yuan Ming straightened his ears, as he glared at her. Helian Wei Wei just smiled and turned onto a long old bridge, as she found the legendary Phoenix Loft. The size of the crowd was bigger than what she had imagined. It was practically a sea of people. The memories of the body told Helian Wei Wei some information about Armament Master. In the entire Dragon War Empire, there were only a few elite armament masters. Although many have cultivated and reached the appropriate level, yet they couldn't understand the fundamentals of dismantle and reconstruct, hence they wouldn't be able to create any armaments. With this kind situation, even for the established cultivator is rather difficult. Since ancient times, objects have been valued by their scarcity. The simple logic of supply and demand. So the amount of people who came to observe the selection of armament master was reasonable. Look who's here. Helian Wei Wei. Why did she come? What? Even the trash came. Why is she here? I saw her score, she has the worst score in the academy, her admission might be cancelled by the headmaster, and yet she still has the guts to leisurely walk around, such an open-minded person. Not just open-minded, I think she is just thick-skinned, her fiancé annulled her, and she is just roaming around, whose face is she losing? The people talked while blatantly glancing at her with disdain. Helian Wei Wei didn't think that she would be meet her fellow students, her lips curved upwards, emitting an icy aura. Yuan Ming excitingly rubbed his hands, are we fighting? This lord have not tasted fresh warm blood for a long time. Yuan Ming, let me remind you once again, we came here to earn money, not to fight. Helian Wei Wei slowly and imperturbed told him, lazily yawned, as if not seeing the crowd of people. Since they were fellow students, why did she need to be afraid that she won't get a chance to get her revenge on them? Why so hasty? Yuan Ming's lips curved up. You're right. There's still many years ahead of us, hee. At this moment, an elderly woman appeared from the Phoenix loft, her face was full of distress and regret, it showed how demanding this test was. However, the Phoenix loft was pretty humane, the process of the test and result would be kept confidential, so even if one failed or not, that person would be the only one who knew. Who else wants to apply? The steward looked around. The crowd looked at each other, still hesitating. Helian Wei Wei walked up, her attitude neither haughty nor humble. Me. Chapter 9. Unprecedented talent. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Misty Cloud Editor. Misty Cloud. Just as her voice faded, burst of taunts and disdain blared around her. Ha! Did I hear it incorrectly? Did the trash just say she also wanted to sign up for the Armament Master Assembly? Is there something wrong with Helian Wei Wei's brain? Did she become dumb after getting her engagement annulled? She's too over-confident, hee. The steward glanced at Helian Wei Wei, her tone full of hesitation, come with me. After getting her attention, the steward turned around and walked into the Phoenix loft. The assessment was not held indoors, but in an antique-styled pavilion. Inside the pavilion was a white jade table, on the table were rows of scrap metal, a gray-haired elder was sitting on a rocking chair, his eyes closed, resting. Even when he sensed Helian Wei Wei's presence, he didn't open his eyes, only said, everything is on table, the assessment is an hour, just move them around as you see fit. From morning till now, not one of them was exceptional, the elder seemed to be dejected, that he became uninterested with the rest of the assessment. Helian Wei Wei scanned at a scrap metal in front of her, her eyes sparkled, as if something flashed by her eyes. Yuan Ming curiously stared at her, what's with this woman? Why is she so happy all of a sudden? Helian Wei Wei just smirked, unhurriedly walked towards the table, she even seemed to be lazy. This made the steward frown. The elder didn't seem to mind, not a lot of people could succeed in an hour anyways. Sigh, it's just his wishful thinking, he shouldn't have held the assessment here. Finally, Helian Wei Wei moved. She was just like an outstanding conductor, she waved her long sleeve. Firstly, she smoothly tied up her hair into a high ponytail, then rolled up her sleeves, her eyes lowered down looking at the scrap metal, her left hand was busy dismantling, while her right hand reconstructed. Her fingers were very nimble, moreover it was rhythmical, in her hands those scrap metal seemed to come alive. Gotcha. When the first part was completed, she unhurriedly picked up the second scrap metal. The elder's facial expression didn't change, but what surprised the steward was that the elder had opened his eyes, and he was even focused on Helian Wei Wei. Helian Wei Wei crossed over her hands, casually moved her fingers, keeping her eye on what she was doing while asking, if I win, I can receive that 10,000 taels. Ha! The steward had not expected such question, he didn't react at the moment. Helian Wei Wei frowned, stopped doing what she was doing, no prize. Then why the hell does she need to do this? Proceed, the elder's deep and rough voice burst out, his spirited eyes looking at Helian Wei Wei. Girl, let me see how fast you can be. Helian Wei Wei smirked, smiled, give me the money first. Money, what money? After finally discovering a good seedling, and this young girl was talking about money with him, he was so anxious. The steward's face was full of awkwardness. It's the money that the Phoenix Loft prepared, the person who wins will receive the prize, I will go and prepare it now. Girl, you've heard him, now can you continue? You can't blame the elder not being level-headed, he wanted to see if what he just saw was an illusion. Sure. Helian Wei Wei cracked her neck. This time she was more swift, as her sharp phoenix eyes raised, her fingers deftly tapped on the scrap metal, and start concentrating on reconstructing. Nobody knew that for the her who had transmigrated from the modern world, weapon dismantling was just a common routine. She could completely dismantle a K4 portable sniper gun in 10 seconds with her eyes closed, then reconstruct the part back together in 10 seconds. She was very familiar with these parts that are made of unknown material and has a perfect radian. In the 21th century, she will need to play with this every day. She didn't expect that in the ancient times there would also be this training. How could Helian Wei Wei not itch to do this? Gotcha. The second part was completed with ease, and successfully latched with the first part. The steward's eyes widened, looked over to the elder. The elder was clutching the teacup in his hand, the other hand was pressed against the rocking chair, as if wanting to stand up. Gotcha, the third part. The steward straightened his neck excitedly. Helian Wei Wei didn't seem to be affected by her surroundings, her pace was very quick, so swift that it was a blur, if you blinked, you would miss her movement. At that moment, the steward was only thinking about how that pair of hands were exceptionally beautiful. She didn't seem to be disassembling something, rather it's more like she was performing a wonderful song, with the crisp sound of gotcha burst between the movement of her fingers. Sections of the metal chain were quickly yet neatly placed upon the white jade table. The elder completely stood up, shockingly his facial expression totally changed. 10 years ago, he accepted a disciple with talent from the Murong family. All these years he was the only one who had more aptitude, but even the boy Murong Zhangfeng from the Murong family could only complete 3 parts. But this brat. 9 segments. She completed all of them. The elder took a deep breath, raised the teacup in his hand, wanting to drink some tea to calm his shock. When he was just about to speak, he saw Helian Wei Wei swiftly turned her hand, all the metal segments lined up together with her fleeted movement, and lined them up into a silver glimmering straight line. Shwa! Helian Wei Wei shifted her fingers, and a long silver whip struck down, so fast that as if the cherry blossom petals would get blown up. 9-tune silver snake. The elder couldn't help but cried out, his hands trembling, his mouth was so wide that flies could fly in, his eyes focused on Helian Wei Wei, as if he found a treasure. How many years has it been? How many years has it been that nobody had succeeded at reconstructing the metal segments together? Moreover, she reconstructed it into a 9-tune silver snake. She was probably the genius that appeared in 10 years. No. Probably in 100 years. The elder could see in the near future, this girl would be an extraordinary armament master that shone with a dazzling light. When he thought about it, the elder can't help but smile. The laugh was mellow and bright, full of excitement that was unprecedented. Girl, this old man has decided, I want you as my disciple. He declared heartily. When Helian Wei Wei heard the news, she didn't say anything, her facial expression was bland, no one could tell if she was happy or angry. Although the steward who was standing at the side was looking at Helian Wei Wei with shock, when he saw that Wei Wei was not moving, his first thought was that she was thrilled, and quickly added. This elder has not accepted any disciple for 10 years, and this time he has the idea to accept you. Miss has such good fortune. If you become his disciple, you will have the same master as young Master Murong. Your future is boundless. The elder slowly stroked his beard, waved his hand while smiling. But what he was not expecting was Helian Wei Wei's repi of, I refuse. Chapter 10. Movement of the Red Phoenix Star. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Misty Cloud Editor. Misty Cloud. The steward was so shocked that his jaw almost dropped onto the floor after hearing the answer. The elder didn't expect that the result would be like this. His whole body tensed up, his eyes staring straight at Helian Wei Wei. Why? No reason. Helian Wei Wei gracefully lowered the long whip, took the money and just left, not caring about their reaction. The elder's facial expression was still stiff, seemed too unable to accept that he was rejected. He didn't know how to describe his emotions right now, stunned, reluctant, add up the regret of not getting this talented disciple. His heart was in turmoil. He suppressed his voice into a low shout. Chang steward, everything about what you saw today, must not be known. Yes. Chang steward hastily nodded his head, even though he didn't understand why Tu Lao suddenly became so serious, but as the steward of the Phoenix Loft, the only thing they did best was to keep secrets. The elder glanced at the 9-tune silver snake. He took the whip up, wrapping it with a black cloth, said, then that's all. As for the rest of the examination, you continue it. I'm going to see the Grandmaster. Ha! The steward looked at the back of the elder who was hastily walking away. He was stupefied. He was just a steward, he didn't know how to grade armaments. Tu Lao, Tu Lao. Chang steward chased after him in little steps while shouting for the elder, yet no matter how much he cried out, the elder didn't even glance back at him. Now, the elder's mind was completely filled with thoughts on how to win over the brat, the extraordinary talent that she possessed. If the other clans knew about her, it would definitely cause powerful people to rise and looking for her, so he must quickly find the Grandmaster, and properly discuss it. Look, the trash came out. Look, only how much time has passed. Did she get kicked out by Tu Lao? Most likely. Tu Lao's temper is pretty bad. The people who have the talent for armament is very little already, and this waste still followed here to join the examination. Getting kicked out is normal. Ignoring the ridicule around her, Helian Wei Wei's expression didn't change at all. Her demeanor was still one of leisure, the same casual manner when she strode in to take the test. Now that it was over so quickly and she had swaggered out, with one look and anyone could see that the results were bad. The crowd was gloating. They were even more sure about Helian Wei Wei being a complete waste. After which, they didn't even spare a glance at her. She was just a waste, she didn't deserve them wasting their energy for her. And yet, they didn't know that the trash they were talking about already won the prize for this armament master assembly. Deep within the Dragon War Empire, from east to west there's an ancient palace. Orchid fragrance was still lit inside the palace, white mist wafting, lulling people to sleep. The servants hung up the lavishly embroidered silver silk drapery, lightly opened the incense burner, added more incense in using a gold spoon, then nimbly left the room without trace. Bailey Jia Ju was laying on his side on the golden-embellished sandalwood chaise lounge, his arms supporting his head, his midnight black hair sprawled out and some rested on his left hand which was holding on to an old scroll. Two beauties were kneeling beside him, holding the incense burner. The clothing they were wearing were so thin. Bailey Jia Ju coldly smiled, pang. He kicked over the burner. Get out. The deep voice was cold, resounding in the spacious palace, sending a cold chill to their spine. The two servants looked at each other, trembling beside Bailey Jia Ju's legs, one hand holding his robe. Your Highness, what did this servant do wrong? This servant can change. The woman raised her palm-sized face, her eyes glistening with tears, her long eyelashes fluttered down like a fan. Any men won't be able to resist this kind of temptation. But Bailey Jia Ju was not like other men. Just then when a servant wanted to fall into Bailey Jia Ju's arms, a silver light flashed by. That palace maid's forehead slanted to a side, then terrifying wisps of blood suddenly spilled out from the corner of her mouth. "Settle it." Bailey Jia Ju's voice coldly announced this command. In less than an hour, the palace had one less unnecessary palace maid. Shadow, who had executed the command, grasped his ice-cold blade as he stood behind Bailey Jia Ju as he watched the scene apathetically. Bailey Jia Ju laughed coldly, and unhurriedly untied his sleeves and threw his robes. "Burn it." "Understood." Shadow lowered his head deferentially. He had long expected this kind of outcome. The master of this family would never allow his outer garments to be touched by others. It seemed, aside from the miss from the Hellion family, nobody else could even come close to this master's body. However, if that miss had not daringly provoked his master, it's possible that master would have long killed her off. Now, he had kept her purely because master had his own unique interests. Shadow saw the master of this family, bemused smile, and all the hairs on his arm stood straight as he threw the expensive outer garment into the fireplace. He observed a moment of silence in tribute for that unknown lady, hoping that she would not die so miserably next time. As the fire burned brightly, some sounds of activity came in from the outside. "Brat, don't pretend that you're not here in front of this old man knows that you are inside. If you have the ability then come out for this old man, and this old man will immediately accept you as a follower." When Shadow heard the commotion outside, a look that said, "No way, not this again," appeared on his face. He quickly called for men to first prepare some clothes to give to his family's master to put on. Bailey Jia Ju was never flustered as he received his outer robe and placed his hands into the sleeves, buttoning each button one by one, without the slightest bit of care for what was happening outside. "Brat." An elderly man dressed in a showy white fur robe rushed in from outside. He was still panting as he said, "This old man knew it, you would definitely be here." Bailey Jia Ju did not care about him as he did not even take a single glance at his fur robe. He only looked on coldly, causing the old man to subconsciously swallow his saliva. He stabilized his breathing, then switched to using sincere and heartfelt words. "The Grand Advisor did a divination, and the divinatory trigram showed that within 3 days you would encounter your life's. Hey, don't tug at me, if you continue to tug at me I'll get angry, okay? Grandmaster." Shadow lowered his voice as he looked directly at the most revered armament master of the kingdom. There was no other reason but fear that his master would beat people to death the moment he was unhappy. The old man immediately shook him off, pointed inside the palace hall and shouted, "Brat, everything that this old man has said is true. There is movement of the red phoenix star, there will definitely be a calamity that follows. If you still want to keep your freedom to do whatever you want, you need to immediately hail me as your master and this old man will help you to solve that divination. Get out." A deep dark voice resonated from within the palace hall, as if it contained a countless amount of light ice blades that could slice through his throat at any time. It really caused one to tremble with fear. The old man's voice that was raised immediately withered, as he pulled back his throat. "Fine then, even if you don't want to hail me as your master, you should come back to White Academy at least. If you still don't come back to class, this old man will fail you." After saying this, he slipped away. In a secret place, the foreheads of the palace eunuchs that were standing at the side were all matted with cold sweat. They trembled as their arms were drooped and didn't even dare to raise their heads. Seeing that the old man had left, Bailey Jia Ju did not stop him. He merely propped himself up with the back of a chair, standing up from the bench. A black-colored feathered cape slowly raised its head. The pair of narrow pupils appeared as if it had found a joy within this insipid life. They got deeper and more demonic. Movement of the red phoenix star. This palace wants to see if a dead red phoenix can still move about.